If you've worked in Photoshop or Sketchbook, you're used to working in layers. The Storybook Pro also offers layers, but unlike Photoshop or Sketchbook, Storybook Pro has two very different types of layers, both vector and bitmap. Now, if you're used to working in Flash or Illustrator, you're really used to vector lines. And of course, Photoshop and Sketchbook use bitmap lines. And I've set the numbering in my system right now to live action. Now, there are some benefits to vector lines. So let's take a look real quick at some vector lines. So I'm going to select a vector layer here, and you can tell it's a vector layer because of these three little graphic icons up on the top. I've named it vector just for ease of use right now. I'm going to grab a brush, and I'm going to select here 25 pixel vector line, and I want to add on to his shoulder here. So I'll just grab a little something there just to finish this off. One of the benefits of a vector line is if I use my node editing tool right here and I select that line, notice all those little node icons there. So I can adjust any node and change the shape of this line and the thickness of the line. I'm going to go ahead and undo that because I don't like the way that looks, but it's something I can do if I want to do. Another benefit of a vector line is that it's resolution independent. I can zoom in as close as I want, and it's always going to have the same quality of look. There's no pixelation to it. Another benefit is that a vector line makes the file size overall much smaller, and playback is faster on older computers. The other thing I can do is elements of a layer can be selected. If I grab my selector tool here, I can just click and drag just over those two, or just this one portion of the line, or just that one portion of a line. And then I can edit or adjust that one element on this layer. I'm going to go ahead and hit undo there. The cons of a vector layer? Well, the line doesn't look as good. And as an artist, we're always looking for as good of a line as I want. However, there is something that's pretty cool. I can do a different type of line. Let me grab my brush tool. I can select a textured brush. Right here is a 25 pixel vector brush. And I can draw that in here, add a little bit more. Notice it looks more like a pencil line. But if I grab my node editing tool, I can select the line, nodes are there, but notice I can't adjust the line if it's a textured line. I can only do that with a vector line on a vector layer. So let's talk about bitmap layers. Let me select this bitmap layer here, and notice the icon up in the top corner of bitmap layer looks like a rising sun over a mountain landscape. So I'm going to grab my brush tool, and I'm going to select, that's a good 25 pixel texture brush. So let's put some vertical pieces of wood in the background here. Maybe put a little wood texture behind him. Just something I can do really quick. It's a beautiful looking line as much as I want. Let's put a little knot right there. A little thickness to the wood. Do some cross hatching on there for the edge of the door. Okay, so now I've sketched in a little bit with my bitmap brush. If I grab my selector tool and I try to grab just that one portion, it grabs all the bitmap elements on that layer. But what if I just want to move, let's say, the knot in the wood? Okay, well, I click and hold on the selector tool and grab my cutter tool. And now I can grab any element of it with my cutter tool, and now I can move that right over here. I can move any element if I want, just like cutting and pasting in Photoshop. So what are some of the benefits of a bitmap layer? Well, the line is always going to look better. It draws most like a pencil, and I can add a blur to a bitmap layer. I'll show you how to do a blur in another movie. The cons of bitmap layers, well, like any bitmap or photograph, it will pixelate as you get too close, and the file size will get larger. Now, I do have the ability to convert one type of line or layer to another. So let's select my vector layer here. Notice the line looks different. It looks pixelated. It'll export fine, but it looks pixelated when you're drawing. I can go to Layer, drop down to Convert to Bitmap Layer. Look how it changed the look of that line. It's absolutely beautiful now. So in order to move anything, I've got to use my cutter tool again. I can grab any portion of it. I can stretch and squeeze, move it around, just like any other element of a bitmap layer. Now I can make that now go back to a vector layer. So layer drop down, convert to vector layer. Now the layer, as you see here, is a vector layer again. But it does not convert my bitmap lines or texture lines to a vector line, but it allows me to add a vector line back onto that layer again. Big difference. Every panel in a storyboard project can have a mix of both vector and bitmap layers like I showed right here. And as you work, you'll prefer one type of layer over another. And if you're working on long and really detailed files and you notice that your computer is starting to drag, try using more vector lines and layers so that the file size doesn't get too slow and cumbersome. But I got to tell you, if you're working on a newer computer, you're definitely not going to run into that issue.